Start then. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining our breakout group. Hopefully my explanation as to what we're going to do today was clear in the intro earlier. But I also would like to thank Deborah and Turka for helping me with the work, and others who have contributed to this work package so far, and for helping to set and organise this session. So Deborah, if you'd like to move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of what we're going to be doing today, so the key challenge that we're trying to address here is why organisations should care about data stewardship. Why should they employ somebody to think about this? Why should they employ somebody to look after data, or at least have some kind of system whereby data stewardship is embedded in the organisation? And that's what we would like to tackle as part of this task. Not every organisation will be aware of why they should have a data stewardship model in place, and they may have to be convinced about the cost of investing in this. So Deborah, if you'd be kind enough to move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the aim of our session today is to collect your thoughts and experiences of when data stewardship has worked well and not so well. We're also interested to think about how organisations perceive data stewardship, and so any thoughts you have around that would be most welcome. We're also then going to explore about what data stewardship should look like, and to answer that, we're going to invite you to provide some case studies that will help us answer that question. So I hope that's clear. Before I begin, does anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, what I'm going to do now is share the link to the Miro board in the chat. If you click on this, you should be able to oh, thanks, Deborah. Yeah, you should be able to join the Miro board in there, and then I will see you in there. I can see some people have already gone in, so we have a few people, a lot of guest drafters and designers. We have Yuri and Richard. Welcome. So, can I just check before we begin, is anybody struggling to get into this room? No? Okay. Let's begin with the, we're going to do this, I think that's right, spend 15 minutes on each of the three sections. I think that ties in with the timing for the session, doesn't it? Yeah. So let's start with exercise 1, and we're going to spend 15 minutes on this, so just until just before 2 minutes to the hour. I don't know if you've used Miro before, but on the left-hand side you should see a toolbar. The fourth icon down, if you hover over that, it says sticky notes. What you can do is create a new sticky note and put it under each of the boxes that we've got laid out here. And what we'd like you to do is explain where data stewardship works well, how does it work well, when it doesn't work well, how so, and capturing your ideas about perceptions of data stewardship. So as an example, I'm just going to pull one over here. And hopefully you can use that quite well and put your thoughts in. Do please be just careful of not deleting somebody else's post-it note. That would be marvelous. Thank you. And just feel free to put as many as you can in, anything you can think of.
But what we should put anything in 3 boxes or not?
So if you any ideas you have underneath each of the headings, for each idea, just put a new sticky note under that heading. Does that make sense?
These questions, what works well? In which context? In context of interest group or task or my life or whatever?
This is about data stewardship. So in terms of organizations managing data stewardship, in your experience, what works well?
Okay, so here I just want to comment that I don't have experience in stewardship, but I'm teaching students to actually the data stewardship or fair knowledge and experience, and have these problems. And my another comment: how much this group can, what this group represent, which kind of community?
So I think we're a fairly broad church, and I think between us all we cover academia and government and the third sector, so charities, and commercial organizations as well. So that's fine. I think in terms of your experience, sorry, I'm not sure the question was from, but I think if you can think about what works well and what doesn't work so well in terms of how you teach those principles, I think that'd be perfectly valid.
So I just want to say I'm also working for, probably known to you, and we did some work already made deliverable on data stewardship competences. So which approach we made? We made this search of a job market and found around 400 vacancies. And we think that people who wants to pay money actually know what data stewards need to do. And based on this, we extracted a lot of responsibilities, function of data stewards, what they need to do means competence, and what knowledge they need to have, and what skills they are expected. So this gives a quite clear picture of what is data steward expected from industry. By the way, vacancies are available for governmental organizations, for charity organizations, and mostly for business, surely.
I think I picked up most of the question there, but I think from some of the things you're saying, there are definitely some good points there which would be worth capturing, particularly around the fact that you think that industry does know that they need to employ data stewards, and there are so many vacancies.
So if anybody is having trouble with Miro, you can just speak up or type in the chat box your contributions for the questions, what work well, what doesn't work so well, and other perceptions, then we can add to the board if you like. Yeah, I also moved the card wrongly viewed.
I wonder if somebody has a good experience this Miro. I'm not.
It's pretty straightforward. So
yes, but how you how to collect information from all this?
I'm sorry you're not finding it very useful. I'm not quite sure exactly. Do you have a particular issue there? I'm sorry, I'm not sure the gentleman's name.
It's Yuri.
Yuri, okay.
I'm very critical and skeptical. So sorry for my...
The idea is for us to work collaboratively in the board. So if you are having trouble using the Miro board, we can add your thoughts to the stick notes. All
no,
those.
I don't have a problem.
Yeah, you contributed with a lot of thoughts, so it would be useful for us to try to summarize in some stick notes, because all of this effort we're going to use to move forward. So, Christina, did you catch up on what we're doing? Do you need any orientation right now?
Hi, no, I'm looking at the Miro board right now. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And I guess you are adding things and moving things around when sort of brainstorming?
Yeah, that's the idea. So we have now 3 questions on what works well, what doesn't work so well, and also a box for perceptions. When we are thinking about the data stewardship within the organizations, and the idea is to make a case on why it's important to have a data stewardship, and help us build a case for organization, why it's important organizations to have this figure. And also, as Richard mentioned in the mail room, so probably you weren't there as well, you are all very welcome to join our task group. We are working on this case for data stewardship, and every contribution is very welcome, also after the plenary.
Yeah, I will continue to have a look and see what I can contribute. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christina. It's as Hugh said. It's this Miro is the equivalent of putting sticky notes on a board if we were together physically. And it's nice to see so many contributions being added across the 3 boards, the 3 boxes here. So yeah, thank you. It's really interesting to see, particularly the ideas around what doesn't work so well. Varsha, it's really interesting your comment about the. I think you're referring to Tony Blair speaking on radio this morning about the need for data curation. That was, I think I was shaving when I heard that. It's very.
Yeah, I was. I almost. Well, I was actually. I was in the middle of my little bit of yoga that I do, and I stopped doing yoga to tweet because I was so excited that data curation got mentioned on the radio.
So I guess if we just have one more minute, please, before we move on. Okay, thank you so much. It looks like we've got some really good feedback from that exercise. Some really helpful comments which we're going to be able to use in our report and which will contribute to this work package. So thank you very much. What I'm not going to do is summarize all of this because there is so much of it. It is incredibly useful. But what I'd like to do now is move on to exercise 2. And I should be able to move you all down with me, I think. So for the second exercise, for 15 minutes, we would like you to post your ideas about what the ideal solution looks like when data stewards support organizations. So thinking about the perfect role that a data steward would play, the perfect approach that an organization would take for deploying a data steward, the perfect, in an ideal world, what support would be provided, what would acceptance throughout the organization look like, etc., etc. So this is a fairly broad question, and people have license to shape this, add their ideas however they like. We're being fairly broad-minded about this. Does anybody have? Is that clear? Does anyone have any questions? And if you'd like to begin, and again, we'll take 15 minutes until 1/4 the hour to work on this. So Elizabeth, oh, sorry, Deborah, you may be going to answer.
Sorry, I don't know what HE is, so I didn't fully understand. Would you like to address Elizabeth's question?
I guess, Elizabeth, you're referring to higher education.
Okay.
And I think there are differences, between different sectors. That's for sure. Also thinking about the size of organisations as well. Maybe small versus very large institutions.
Where I believe there are differences if we are talking about domain-specific organizations, and if they are science organization that covers all domains also. Would you like to comment, Elizabeth?
I suppose I was just asking because I was thinking about the question is what is the ideal? And I think the ideal obviously will depend on the working environment. So I don't know if it's helpful if people to sort of, when you're putting this together, whether you have some idea about the sector that people are considering. So seeing what people are writing on the board, it might say work together with library staff. That would imply to me it's a very higher education environment. You might be in an organisation that doesn't have a library staff, for example. So I'm just wondering about how you're going to analyse this for business cases models, thinking about the differences potentially between sector, or whether everybody's coming at this from the same type of organisation, and therefore we're only getting one perspective on it.
I think that's a really helpful comment, and I mean, really, Elizabeth, I'd really encourage you, please, to add that as a note, post it under the box. I think I completely agree. We could be in danger of being, possibly biased or thinking about these things from a certain perspective, but we certainly want to think about this in terms of non-academic sectors too.
Can I my comments? May I comment on what Elizabeth just said as well? And what you
please do, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like a really important thing to be thinking about in terms of what we're talking about, the business case. It doesn't necessarily mean private sector, but it means actually funding the activity that happens, and the activity may happen in several different areas, and that's kind of what we're learning. But yeah, that's just to say that I'm thinking about business case in that broader context of how do you gather the funds needed to do the work that is required. So
yeah, hi Varsha.
hey.
I know. I didn't mean private sector because of business case. I was just used private sector as an example of not higher education.
Okay.
Because I thought we were thinking broadly that data stewards could be in any sort of organisation. And so, example, I don't know, pharmaceutical industry are probably going to have data stewards and things. So I knew business case meant more than.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I was probably only half listening as well because I was trying to think of.
No, it's because I was trying to think about the ideal and what to put on the board.
Yeah, no worries.
So can I just check, please, what time we have to come back to the main room?
I believe it's when it's the counter here comes to 10 minutes. Is that correct? Varsha, Mike, I don't know if you are here. You can see who are in the room. Let me.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's right. So it's 12:45 p.m. UK time that the whole thing ends. So we need to be back by UK time.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we're quite well ahead of time. The amount of activity has dropped a little bit. So before we move on to the next question, and people can feel free to carry on adding their post-it notes, I was just sort of wondering if anyone would like to highlight their own particular post-it note, and so I'd just invite anybody who would like to talk about something they've raised.
I think I'm missing a little discussion here because there are so many good ideas. So I would just comment that one thing I put here is that data stewardship being recognized as a profession worldwide. So that's not a recognized profession in Brazil where I live, and probably in many places elsewhere. So I would like to hear your thoughts about how recognized it is worldwide already.
Hi, Deborah, I think, just jumping in, it seems the more I talk to people, the more it seems that everybody kind of thinks that they're 5 steps behind everybody else. So, for example, actually, when you talk to people like within this group, obviously we're saying, yeah, data stewardship is really important, but I don't think there's any one country that really sort of says, oh yeah, we have an official recognition for data stewardship and so on. We're sort of at that. We're all kind of at that point, and it's really true for Brazil or South Africa as well as for Belgium and Ireland as a thing worth noting there. I think if there was one thing I and this is me kind of blowing my horn, but I thought it was interesting that there's 2 notes here. And I wrote one of them, so I'm shamelessly advertising that this idea that institutions get the idea of the data life cycle, and that research projects should be organized in that way, with the data steward being involved in it. So, you know, the particular example of sort of like data stewards are not sort of like dragged in after the data's been collected and say, oh, fix all this for us, you know, that you kind of get to that point, you know. So yeah, that's just one way to say. Yeah, thanks, Amy. You wrote the other one.
I think that's a really good point, and I know from my own personal experience, you know, working in different organisations, you know, you can be sort of dragged into that process halfway through, and you know, you're almost in a firefighting position where you're just trying to make sure the right thing does happen, or you're being asked to support something halfway through a project where previously, you know, the data stewardship element hadn't been present. So I suppose people either really appreciate your help, I think they generally do, at least in my experience, or they find that, you know, you're coming in and it's quite a pain for them to, possibly they have to redesign some of their processes to make it
yeah, maybe Christina here, if I could mention something that I noticed, and also something that I wrote myself on these, like how we organize data stewards. That it can be like, I saw other people writing that as well about, you know, it's very important, of course, to have data stewards on specific projects, but there's also a need to have a sort of a central unit or a place, you know, as more of a first line and the second line of support for data, that you feel that you're a part of a larger organization within the university, where you can also get support yourself as a data steward, and yeah, to work on different levels on policy and driving the developments, and then also really supporting the projects. And yeah, I think that is if you only have data stewards in specific projects around, I come from a university, so I say university, but I think it's the same actually if we have a large organization in industry, for example, that they will feel isolated and maybe not up to date with the recent developments or, you know, the supporting needs.
I think, again, it's something I've definitely recognised, and I think if you're playing a data steward role in a particular team, but without wider institutional support, that can be a bit lonely, and it can be quite difficult if, you know, you can not necessarily have the support when you're advising to how to protect the data. We can move on to the next question now, unless anybody would like to add anything else. I think we've got some time. No? Okay. Well, let's move to the third axis. Oh, sorry, was there somebody? Richard, thank you.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I think in my own institute, we deal with both long-term data and sort of short-term projects, and there's a real split in the way how people view data between the two. So with the long-term projects, which span, you know, we've got data collection spanning many decades, people recognise there is a clear value in that data, and so there is investment in stewardship of that, active investment in stewardship of that data. But for the short-term projects, which can be anything from a few months to a few years, it just isn't there. There isn't the investment in active management of that data, and that's the real problem that we have, is how you provide the sort of the ongoing curation of data after a project has finished. And the researchers, they recognise it's needed, but the pressures to keep winning grants and so on are such that they finish the project and they're already thinking about the next grant application halfway through their current grant application and carrying that through. So the last thing that's on that they want to worry about is how they preserve the data from one project after that's finished. It's correcting some of those sort of more systemic issues, I think, that we also have to deal with.
Thanks, Richard. I wasn't sure if you'd made a note of that already, so I've made a quick one just to remind me. I think that's a really important point, and thank you for making it. Okay, so yeah, I think let's move on to the last one now. So for this exercise, which will take us through to 1:30, we'd like you to name any case studies where you think they're memorable in terms of something that worked really well, or perhaps something that worked really badly. We hope to use these examples in our report to illustrate and make this case for data stewardship. So again, please do chip in if you're not sure or have any questions. It's an interesting example, Varsha. That must have been a little bit awkward for the researchers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could have been very difficult indeed, but just to show that, the fact that we have this curation step at Scientific Data helped to resolve that. When you're talking about a data paper, it's particularly galling, I think. And they just made a human error. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of the things that we pick up during curation are just human errors. People are, normal, and they make mistakes, and we just make sure that those don't go through to print.
That's a nice example as well, Deborah.
That's how I started working with this. So we had this RTR site, and it was very hard to find the data, although it should be a permanent plots and everything. So when we started organizing, we managed to publish very nice articles with, a lot of species together, and really moving forward with the ecological analysis in that site. So that's what motivated me to work with this since then.
So that's an interesting point you've made, Richard, about decoupling data steward investment funding from specific projects. I think that's what you're suggesting, and making it more of a central function.
It's
Yeah.
something that we're discussing very much at the moment, is how we go about doing this. Again, it comes down to the way we're funded. It's a lot of our money comes from project grants, and we don't have enough core funding to really to support these sorts of activities.
That reminds me of putting funding in the ideal box. So it's probably the main issue.
And there's some data horror and happy stories. That sounds really interesting. I'm not sure who added that, but thank you so much, whoever did. I'll check those out. Look forward to checking those out later. I'm not sure if Yuri is with us still, but I did like the point Yuri made about teaching data stewardship. I think there's something there to be explored further as part of this work. Thinking about your point, Deborah, I remember after I left UK Data Service, I moved to an organisation where data were all over the place. It was really difficult. I think the first thing I did was to think about categorising the data to work out which were the most sensitive and which needed the most work on in terms of looking after them, and then moving on to the less sensitive from then on. That seemed to work, and it protected the organisation, I think, in a way. I think otherwise the organisation could have got into trouble. But that coming into an organisation and experiencing that everything's all over the place I suspect that's quite common.
Did you find very different perceptions from the people you needed to approach? That's what I found. So in our case, soil data is very expensive to be obtained and hard, and everybody uses soil and environmental variables to analyze the species distributions and things like that. And it was pretty much straightforward to deal with the soil data, but for the tree species biomass data, it was very hard because everybody wants to publish about carbon cycling, and the data owners, they were not so comfortable with sharing the data, and it was very hard to to make the case of how it was important to make it available for further analysis. Did you have experiences like that also on different perceptions from the data owners or producers?
I mean, I think I've had experience both. I mean, I think some data owners are sort of, for me, just like didn't want to share anything. I think others wanted to share everything. So it's trying to get the right balance. And I guess there's something about data stewardship. It's not necessarily just about data protection, but it's actually, I think personally, it's role of data steward is to make sure data are used. So things shouldn't just be locked in a cupboard.
One thing that we've encountered, so I work a lot with long-term agricultural experiments, and something that we've found within the wider international communities, you quite often find that people are running experiments for a couple of decades, and they're doing it on a very small budget, and they've collected loads and loads of data, and they're getting close to retirement, and they see the data as a big part of their legacy, but they don't. So having previously not been that interested in sharing it, as they approach retirement, they're suddenly very interested in sharing this data, but they've got no support for how to do that. So there's lots of potentially really valuable long-term data that's just sitting on people's hard drives in Excel files because nobody knows what to do with it across the community. But there's the willingness to share that data is there, especially when people start to see it as part of their legacy.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, great point, Richard. Thanks.
So we've still got a couple of minutes left if anyone wants to add any on there. Underneath the current box, so you'll see a big red arrow that says finally, and another box underneath that. And I'd just like to invite you, if you would like to continue supporting us with this work, do drop your email on a note in this box, and we can then be in touch. If you're not so sure you'd like everyone else to see your email address, of course you can contact me via the slides had my email address on, or I can put this into the chat room, but otherwise please do add in the box below. Or join the Slack channel, as Micah has suggested.
Hi, Richard and Deborah. I just wanted to say this has been such a great session. I've really enjoyed it, and it feels like actually been doing some work. So it's really good. So just thank you to both of you for pulling this together, and yeah, really well done.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who's come along and participated as well. I mean, as Varsha said, this has been a working session, so you've done a lot of the hard work for us. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to collating these notes and building them into the final report for this project. Once you've, if you'd like to add on your email address, we'll be in touch, and then I think you could just return back to the main room, and it looks like there's a link at the bottom of the video screen for you to do that. So I think I'm going to leave the room now, unless there's anybody who has any other comments or questions they'd like to raise just now.
I just would like to say that go back to the main room. You just need to scroll down, and there is this link back to the IG professionalizing data stewardship and everything. Please feel free to make any comments before we leave.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you back in the main room. Thanks. Bye now.